Good afternoon, parents. Mrs. P back again to give you a small video on what we were discussing in class today and a little heads up on what we're going to be discussing for the rest of this week. On Friday and today, we were talking and discussing solving algebraic expressions. Now, I have already put up 2 videos so far on the YouTube channel. One was about exponents and expressions in general. What are they? The second one was writing algebraic expressions. Well, the next sensible thing to go into is once we know what they are, once we can write them, can we then solve them? So just a couple quick notes on what I tell students in order to help them understand how do we go about solving this thing that you call an unknown value in an expression. So solving algebraic expressions, you recall that this is a numerical expression. To change that, we simply add a letter, which now I told you the students will not call it a letter because the letter is what's in the alphabet, A to Z, whichever one you want. Once you put what is known as a letter from the alphabet in an expression, which is a number phrase, a mathematical phrase in math, that letter is now called a variable, and that variable is an unknown value that students are trying to solve for. There's only 2 ways, technically, a student can solve an expression that has an unknown value in it, known as a variable. So if I give you an example, here's some that we were kind of working on today. 3x plus 7 equals. There's only 2 ways that a student can solve this. 1, I can tell them what x is. I give them the variable value. I can give them what x is, and then they can solve it out here, and they will give me the sum. Why is it a sum? Because my operation sign right there tells me that my final solution is going to be a sum. So I can solve it by giving them what x is. Or I could give them what the sum is already. So in this instance, if I said the solution, which is known as the sum, the solution, known as the sum, is equal to 13. Then the students could also solve the problem. And I'm going to show you those 2 ways. So I said in the beginning, I'm going to give them x. So if I tell them x is 9, x is equal to 9. My problem started off as 3x plus 7 equals a sum. If I'm going to give them x, it's a simple substitution method. It just means take whatever the variable is and substitute it in for where it's at so that you now know the number. Your students know any number by a variable means to multiply. So I have the 3, I fill in the 9, I add the 7. From here, I must remember the order of operations. And parents, I've talked a lot about this with your students. This is the big deal. They have learned this thing known as PEMDAS. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. The one little piece that they kind of didn't catch on to is these 2 things must come first in that group. These 2 things must come in that group. And these 2 things must come in that group. Whichever comes first, left to right in the group. What does that mean? Parentheses and exponents must come first, however they come. Multiplication and division must come second. It doesn't matter, multiplication or division. It's whichever one comes left to right. Then addition and subtraction follow up at the end in the 3rd group. That is very important because your students right here, they're so used to, oh, I love addition. They'll do 9 plus 7, and that's going to give them a totally different answer than the correct response. They must first do multiplication because multiplication is a higher order math than adding and subtracting. So they must do 3 times 9 is 27 plus the 7 to get the answer of 34. If they don't do that correctly, any teacher, any mathematician is going to count that wrong. If your students go 9 plus 7 is 16, and then they say 16 times 3 is 48, that is not the correct answer. And they're going to get upset, and you might too. So make sure your students explain to you how to use this notion known as PEMDAS, because I've went over that with them, and it's really very important. So here's the way we use it when we substitute. I give them the variable, what the value is, they fill it in, there is the answer. That's the first way. The second way is I tell them a solution. So the problem started off, 3x plus 7 equals 16. No, I don't want to do that one. I have to make sure I get one that's in my head that I can, I can do 16. 16. I had a different one in my head to begin with. That's how mathematicians always thinking of numbers. 16. Now, as we move forward, we're going to find out an actual process in algebra to solve this problem. But your kids right now will look at this and they will say, 7 from 16. I know that's 9. So what times 3 is going to give me 9? And they figure out that 3 times 3 plus 7 equals 16. They know 3 times 3 is 9, and 9 plus 7 is 16. And that is the second thing that they must be given in order to solve these algebraic expressions. Now we're going to get more into this as we move forward in 6th grade algebra. Right now, they need to know this. We're also going to go so far as, what if you don't get either one of these? Can you answer this? And they can, but it does become more difficult and for them more challenging. But they're going to be able to do it. I trust in them, and as long as you trust in me and that I trust in them, it's going to work out, I promise. And or if not, we can ask tons of questions to figure it out together. Because I told them algebra is like life. You're always trying to figure out what's unknown, and we all have problems. What's unknown in that problem, and how can I solve it? That's it for tonight. I'll see you all back here tomorrow. Have a great evening.